Think about every animal you have ever eaten. Cow, pig, chicken, sheep, maybe deer, maybe rabbit, maybe duck. Now try to remember the last time you ate a lion, or a wolf, or a bear, or an eagle, or a tiger. You never have. Almost nobody ever has. Our species has spread into every corner of this planet and eaten almost everything that moves. We have eaten insects, whales, snakes, snails, bats, and bones. But there is one entire category of animal that we have quietly, almost universally, refused to put on the menu: predators. And the reason is not squeamishness, and it is not luck. It is one of the coldest, hardest rules in all of nature. And once you see it, you cannot unsee it. And here's what makes it strange. We are not scared of them. Humans have been killing large predators for hundreds of thousands of years. We drove cave lions to extinction. We wiped wolves out of entire countries. We killed bears with spears made of sharpened rock, so it was never that we could not catch them. We killed them constantly, and then, over and over again, we walked away and left the meat. Think about that. A hungry human, in a hard world, standing over hundreds of kilos of fresh meat, choosing not to eat it. Why? What did our ancestors know that made an entire class of animal not worth eating? There are several layers to this, and the last one will change how you look at the food on your own plate. Let us go. Start with how absolute this rule really is, because it is almost unbelievable. Go anywhere on Earth, into any culture at any point in history, and look at what people farm. Cattle, sheep, goats, pigs, chickens, horses, camels, rabbits. Now look for the farm that raises wolves for meat, or lions, or hawks. It does not exist. It has never existed. Out of thousands of human societies spread across every continent and every climate, all of them independently arrived at the same conclusion, without ever talking to each other. And when thousands of separate groups of people all reach the same answer on their own, that is not culture. That is physics. So before we get into it, a question for the comments, and I am genuinely curious. Have you ever eaten a predator? And I mean really, on purpose. Bear, crocodile, shark, something a relative brought back from a hunting trip? Some of you absolutely have, and I want to know what it tasted like, because that description is going to be very relevant in a few minutes. Drop it below. And for everyone else, hold that thought, because by the end of this video, you are going to realize you have been eating predators your whole life without noticing. Now, the first reason. The first answer is the simplest, and it is just arithmetic. It is called the 10% rule, and it governs every food chain on this planet. When an animal eats, it does not turn its food into body. Most of that energy gets burned just staying alive. Moving, breathing, keeping warm, growing hair, running away from things. Only about 10% of the energy at one level of a food chain ever makes it into the level above. So it takes roughly 10 kilos of grass to build 1 kilo of rabbit, and it takes roughly 10 kilos of rabbit to build 1 kilo of fox. Follow that chain and something brutal falls out of it. It means that 1 kilo of predator costs about 100 kilos of plants to produce. 100. Compare that to a cow, which costs about 10. In pure energy terms, predator meat is one of the most absurdly expensive substances on Earth. Now imagine trying to farm it. To raise a lion, you have to feed it meat. Piles of it. Meat that you could simply have eaten yourself without running it through a lion first and losing 90% of it in the process. Farming a carnivore is like buying $100 of food, feeding it to something that hates you, and getting $10 of food back out. And this is exactly why every single farm animal you can name is a plant eater. This is the real genius of livestock, and almost nobody thinks about it. A cow eats grass. You cannot eat grass. Your stomach cannot break down the cellulose, so a field of grass is worthless to you as food. But a cow can walk onto that useless field and turn it into milk, fat, and muscle that you can eat. A herbivore is a machine that converts things you cannot eat into things you can. A carnivore does the exact opposite. It takes food you already wanted and destroys most of it. One is an investment. The other is a hole in your bucket. There is a second half to that arithmetic, and it decides everything. Because energy shrinks at every step, predators are always rare. Look at any healthy ecosystem and it is shaped like a pyramid. Vast numbers of plants, fewer herbivores, and at the very top, a tiny handful of predators. One pride of lions needs an enormous territory full of prey just to stay alive. So even if predator meat were delicious and safe, there was never very much of it. You cannot build a food supply out of the rarest animals in the landscape. There will never be enough lions to feed a village, and there will always be enough deer. So already the case is strong. Predators are expensive, rare, and impossible to farm. But that still does not explain the whole thing, because our ancestors were not running an economy. They were hungry. And a hungry hunter who has just killed a wolf that was threatening the camp is not doing energy calculations. There is a dead animal in front of him, and meat is meat. So why did he still walk away? Because there is something else in that carcass. Something that made eating predators genuinely physically dangerous, and it is the part almost nobody talks about. Picture the actual moment, because this is where the rule was really written. It is 100,000 years ago. Your band has just killed a big cat that had been circling the camp for days. 2 of you are injured. The animal is enormous, still warm, and there is more meat lying in the dirt than your whole group could carry. Everyone is hungry. Nobody has eaten properly in 2 days, and the older woman in the group looks at the carcass and says no. Take the skin, take the teeth, leave the meat. That is a genuinely shocking decision to make while hungry, and she is not being superstitious. She is remembering something, and in a moment you will understand exactly what. Here it is. When you eat an animal, you are not just eating that animal. You are eating everything it ever ate. Scientists call it bioaccumulation, and it works like a filter running in the wrong direction. Every toxin, every heavy metal, every parasite that an animal picks up from its food tends to stay in its body instead of being flushed out. So a deer spends its life eating plants and quietly collects a little of whatever was in the soil. Now a wolf eats 100 of those deer over its lifetime, and it collects everything all 100 of them collected, concentrated into one body. Go one level higher and it concentrates again. This means an apex predator is not just an animal. It is a living container holding the accumulated poison of an entire food chain, packed into a single carcass. And your ancestors did not need to know the chemistry. They only needed to watch what happened to the people who ate it. And if that just permanently changed how you look at a steak, that is what this channel does. We take one ordinary thing and pull on it until it turns into something you cannot unsee. So subscribe, because now we get to the specifics. What is actually inside a predator? And one of them killed some of the toughest explorers who ever lived in one of the most horrifying ways I have ever read about. Start with the parasites, because this is the one that really enforced the rule. There is a worm called trichinella, and it lives in muscle. When one animal eats infected meat, the larvae wake up in its gut, breed, and burrow out into the new animal's muscles to wait, which means the parasite concentrates in exactly the animals that eat the most meat, carnivores. Today, in countries with full food inspection, the single biggest source of human trichinosis is not pork. It is bear meat, and the symptoms are exactly what you would expect from worms moving into your muscles. Fever, agony, swelling of the face, and in bad cases, worms reaching the heart and the brain. Now put yourself back in a small band of humans 100,000 years ago. There is no germ theory, there are no microscopes, but there is memory. The group kills a big cat, they eat it, and a week later, 3 people are burning with fever and cannot walk. It happens again a few years later with a wolf. And again. That is all it takes. You do not need to understand parasites to learn a rule that saves your life. You just need to notice the pattern, tell your children, and let that story travel down 1,000 generations until it stops being a warning and becomes a tradition. That is what a food taboo actually is. It is compressed experience. And then there is the most spectacular example of all, and it is genuinely grim. The polar bear. A polar bear eats seals, and seals are packed with vitamin A, and the bear stores it in its liver in a concentration that is simply not survivable for a human being. Arctic explorers learned this the hard way. Eat polar bear liver, and within hours you get crushing headaches and vomiting. Then the skin begins to peel off your body in sheets. In the worst cases, people died. And the astonishing part is that the Inuit, who had lived up there for thousands of years, already knew. Their rule was simple and absolute. You may eat the bear, but you never, ever eat the liver. They had no idea what a vitamin was. They just knew what happens. Quick one for the comments while we are here. How many food rules do you follow that you have never actually questioned? Things you would not eat, not because you tried them and disliked them, but simply because you were taught they are not food. Almost every one of those started as somebody, somewhere, getting very sick, and the memory outliving the explanation. Tell me the strangest food rule from your family or your country below. I want to see how many turn out to be ancient survival advice in disguise. Alright, next layer. The same concentrating effect works for metals, and this one is still hurting people today. Mercury enters the water. Tiny organisms absorb it. Small fish eat those. Bigger fish eat the small ones, and at every step, the mercury climbs. By the time you reach the top of a marine food chain, a big shark or a swordfish or an old tuna, the levels can be thousands of times higher than in the water around them. This is not ancient history. It is the reason health authorities right now tell pregnant women to limit exactly those fish. That warning label is the 10% rule and bioaccumulation printed on a supermarket shelf. And if you want proof that this rule is real and not folklore, we ran the experiment ourselves, by accident within living memory. In the 20th century, industrial farming worked out that you could grind up the leftover parts of slaughtered animals and feed them back to livestock as cheap protein. So we took the cow, the most committed plant eater on the planet, and quietly turned it into a carnivore. And nature sent the bill. What came back was mad cow disease, an untreatable condition that eats holes in the brain, and it crossed into the people who ate the beef. We broke the oldest food rule our species has at industrial scale, and it killed people. Our ancestors did not have the science. They just had the sense not to try it. And if you follow that rule one step further, all the way to the top of the food chain, it points somewhere deeply uncomfortable. At us. We are the ultimate apex predator. We eat the predators of the sea and the herbivores of the land, and everything those animals spent their lives accumulating ends up, concentrated, in you. Which means that by the exact logic of this video, human meat is among the most contaminated meat on the entire planet. And nature has already shown us the receipt for that one too. In Papua New Guinea, a community that practiced ritual cannibalism developed a disease called kuru, a shaking, incurable illness that ate holes in the brain, from the same family of rogue proteins as mad cow. The oldest food rule our species has does not stop at wolves and lions. It closes the loop, and it ends on us. And then there is the simplest reason of all, the one your tongue would tell you immediately. Predator meat is usually unpleasant. A predator's body is built for explosive violence, so the muscle is dense, stringy, and tough. Their bodies process enormous amounts of protein, which leaves waste products in the tissue and gives the meat a strong, sour, gamey flavor that most people find genuinely hard to swallow. And they carry very little of the soft fat that makes a cow or a pig taste good. So even setting aside the parasites and the poison, you have gone to enormous danger and expense to obtain the worst-tasting meat available. Which brings us to the part our ancestors felt most sharply, the cost of getting it. To eat a deer, you have to catch an animal whose entire strategy is running away. To eat a lion, you have to defeat an animal whose entire strategy is killing things. One of those mistakes ends with you going hungry. The other ends with you dead or maimed for life in a world with no hospitals. So run the whole calculation as a hunter. Enormous risk of death to obtain a small amount of tough, foul-tasting meat that might be riddled with worms, against a deer standing right over there with none of those problems. It is not a difficult decision, and the archaeology backs this up in a really satisfying way. We do find the bones of predators at ancient human sites. Cave lions, wolves, cave bears, all showing the cut marks of stone tools. So we definitely killed them and we definitely processed them, but look at where the cuts are. Many of them are around the paws and the skull, along the edges of the body. Those are the marks of skinning, not butchering. We were taking the pelt, the claws and the teeth, the warm fur, the status, the trophy, not the dinner. We were killing predators the way you deal with a rival, not the way you deal with a meal. Because that is what they really were to us. Not food. Competition. A lion is not a walking meal. A lion is another hunter working your territory, eating the deer you needed, and occasionally eating you. When ancient humans killed large predators, it was usually to remove a threat and to take a valuable skin, not to fill a stomach. We spent 2 million years in a quiet, brutal war with the carnivores of the world over who got to eat the herbivores. And we won that war so completely that most of them are now rare, protected, or gone. And there is one beautiful exception to that war, sitting on somebody's sofa right now. Out of every predator on Earth, we took exactly one into our homes. The wolf. We brought the most successful pack hunter in the northern hemisphere to our fires, and over thousands of years we turned it into the dog. And look at what we did with it. We did not eat it, we made it a partner and pointed it at the herbivores instead, which tells you everything about how our ancestors really valued a carnivore. Not as meat, but as a weapon. A wolf in your camp is worth far more hunting deer beside you than it is ever worth on a plate. If this is landing, hit the like button. It genuinely is the one signal that tells the algorithm to put this in front of somebody else who would enjoy it, and it costs you a second. Okay, now we get to my favorite part of this whole video, because everything I have just told you has a gigantic hole in it, and you have almost certainly been on the wrong side of that hole this week. Because you do eat predators, constantly, probably more often than you think. Tuna is a predator, a ferocious one, a torpedo built to run down other fish. Salmon is a predator. Cod is a predator. Bass, trout, swordfish, squid, Almost the entire seafood counter is full of carnivores. We are quite happy to eat the apex predator of a lake, and we would be horrified at the idea of eating the apex predator of a forest. Same rule, opposite answer, and the reason we make that exception explains the entire rule better than anything else. The ocean breaks the rule because it changes every term in the equation. A fish is cold-blooded, so it does not burn most of its energy just keeping warm, which makes it far more efficient at turning food into body than a lion is. Marine food chains are also enormously productive, so predatory fish exist in huge numbers instead of being desperately rare. And crucially, a tuna cannot maul you. You can take a predatory fish out of the water with a net and a boat at almost no personal risk at all. Cheap, abundant, safe to catch, and it tastes good. Every single reason to avoid predators collapses the moment you go underwater. But notice that the one rule the ocean cannot break is the one about poison, because we do eat marine predators and we do get exactly what the rule promises. Mercury in tuna, mercury in swordfish and shark. Official advice to limit how much of them you eat, and to be especially careful if you are pregnant. So the ancient warning is still there. We just moved it from a story told around a fire to a footnote printed on a package. The chemistry never changed. Only our excuse did. And there are a few more cracks in the rule, and they are all worth knowing. Bear meat is still eaten in parts of the world, and it is precisely where most human trichinosis now comes from, which is not a coincidence. Crocodiles and alligators are farmed and eaten, and notice what makes that possible. They are cold-blooded, so they are far more efficient to feed than a mammal. And in various times and places, people have eaten dogs, foxes, and seals. The rule was never a law of the universe. It was always a calculation, and where the numbers change, the answer changes with them. And some animals do eat predators routinely, without any trouble at all, which raises the obvious question of why we cannot. Meet the specialists. A vulture will happily eat a rotting carnivore that would kill you within a day, and it can do that because its stomach acid is close to battery acid, strong enough to dissolve bone and destroy almost every pathogen on the way down. A hyena has jaws and a digestive system built to crush and process the parts nothing else will touch. These animals paid for that ability with millions of years of specialized evolution. We did not. Our stomachs are the mild, unremarkable stomachs of an omnivore that mostly ate plants, fruit, and fresh prey. So the rule was never that predator meat is universally poisonous. It is that it is poisonous to something built like us. So here is your side to pick, and I want to see this fight in the comments. Team Energy says the real reason is the arithmetic, that predators are simply too expensive and too rare to ever be worth farming or hunting, and everything else is a bonus argument. Team Poison says no, the decisive factor is what is inside them, the parasites and the accumulated toxins, and that is what actually taught our ancestors to leave the carcass. Which one do you think really wrote this rule? Pick a side, say why, and go argue. I will pin the best answer from each camp. And now the part that ties it together. We tend to think of food taboos as culture, arbitrary rules that a society invented and then dressed up in tradition and religion. But look at what we have actually found here. Thousands of separate human groups on every continent, most of whom never met, all landed on exactly the same rule about exactly the same category of animal. That does not happen by accident. It happens because they were all solving the same problem, with the same arithmetic, under the same laws of chemistry. This was never a preference. It was the universe quietly charging the same price everywhere, and every one of our ancestors reading the bill correctly. So look at your own dinner again. Every animal we chose to build our civilization on, the cow, the sheep, the goat, the pig, the chicken, is a creature that eats things you cannot eat, carries less accumulated poison, breeds quickly, exists in large numbers, and will not kill you while you try to catch it. That is not a coincidence, and it is not tradition. That is 10,000 years of our species running the same brutal calculation over and over and quietly writing the answer into every menu on Earth. And the strangest part is that you inherited the answer without ever being told the question. Nobody sat you down and explained trophic energy loss or bioaccumulation. You simply grew up knowing, at some level below thinking, that a cow is food and a wolf is not. That knowledge cost real lives to acquire. Somewhere back along your line, people got sick, people died, and the survivors remembered. You are carrying the finished conclusion of an experiment that ran for 2 million years, and it feels to you like nothing more than common sense. So go and check the label on the next tin of tuna you open and see whether it mentions mercury. That is a 2 million-year-old rule, still doing its job on a supermarket shelf. And tell me in the comments if you have ever eaten a predator and whether it was as tough and sour as the science says it should be. If you made it this far, thank you. Hit like, subscribe, and drop your team, energy or poison, because we just spent this whole video on why we refuse to eat them, which leaves a much stranger question hanging. There is a predator in the ocean that is smarter than us, faster than us, and hunts great white sharks for sport, and it could kill you anytime it wanted. And for some reason, it never does. Why won't the ocean's deadliest predator kill us? That is the next video. I will see you there.